Ooh. Hi folks. Well, I'm Niven. I guess you've heard a little bit about me. I'm pleased to be chatting to you guys. It sounds like you're all very enthusiastic about making films and drama, etc. I'll try and give you some insights into editing. I still get really shocked. Some people I'm introduced to who have nothing to do with media, they say, "Oh, what do you do?" I say, "I'm a film editor." They say, "Oh, right, so you cut the bad bits out, do you? You cut out the mistakes." They think that all I do is just, when there's a mistake, I chop it out. I'd love it if that was all I did. Obviously, you've had a little bit of experience about editing, and in fact, it's a lot more than that. A good friend of mine was actually asked to judge at BAFTA for the best editing category, and he said, he's an editor, he said, "Well, I'll only do it if you give me the assembly and then what the finished film was, because it's what's removed quite often that's so important. You can completely transform a story. Lock, Stock, for instance, we had a character in that we completely removed. Yeah, there was a female love interest that was the sister of the drug dealer who Eddie fell in love with, and the ending was him driving off with the money. It was terrible. We tested the movie. We knew we had something special in there, but we had to remove this character to make it work. And we filmed a whole different ending with the jeopardy of losing the guns that we found out were worth so much money, blah, blah, blah. So that was developed in the cutting room, and 3 or 4 of us got together and we talked out ideas, threw up the famous scene in the Italian Job, the original Italian Job, where they're in a coach and there's gold bullion at one end and it's tipping over. And that gives the idea of Jason Fleming on the bridge with the guns, about to drop them in the water. Yes, you can really make a huge difference to a movie with editing. And also scripts. You start off with a script, you shoot that script. Quite often what you shoot isn't exactly what you envisioned. My job as an editor is to take what's in those, as we used to say, cans. Obviously they're not cans anymore, but realize the best potential of what's in that can. And it's not necessarily what's been shot. So often I'm given storyboards where it's very carefully mapped out. I'll throw those away to start with and just go with my gut instinct, watch all the takes and decide, in my opinion, what's the best way to put it together. And often it's in a different order to how it was originally thought out. A lot of my films, we've actually shifted scenes around. There's a film I did called The Hole with Thora Birch and Keira Knightley, and the script was not quite ready. We had to use Thora because she was on a pay or play. There was a deadline, we had to get her filmed. The script was still being developed. So we went to camera, realizing it had issues, and sure enough, I ended up moving a whole chunk of the film to the last act. It was in the middle, and it revealed that she had the key and locked everyone in halfway through the film. It was terrible. You're just playing out the inevitable. So that was tricky. We had to look at costumes, because okay, you can have people change costumes, but if they change a costume and then suddenly they're in a previous costume again, you realise, but actually Get Away with Murder, and we actually did an awful lot of stuff, and I look at it now, I think, wow, that website looking for continuity errors would have a field day. But it seems that I'm very, because it's what I do, I actually jolt sometimes watching movies when I see continuity errors, and I look around and no one's but an eyelid, because normal folks just don't see it. So it's quite shocking you can get away with murder. Anyway, so when I started off, quite shockingly, 30 years ago, there was no nonlinear editing. We had to edit in a linear fashion, which meant you had to try and get it right first time, because changing a cut was unraveling everything. There's two ways of doing it, either splicing film or on a tape. And we'd copy tape to tape, recording sections overlapping. That was a great discipline, and I feel a little bit that that's missing from people when they actually learn how to edit nowadays. They haven't had to learn that discipline of trying to get the first cut right. You can do it really roughly. And I find that the first cut that is just done by your gut feeling is often the best one, and we change it, and I can then look back and see what we did originally, and often that one goes back in. So that's something to bear in mind. Although I do have another good editor friend who's of the opinion that you just roughly throw it together and move on and come back and then look really carefully at it. And there's, I've seen that work in some cases. But on the shoot, I'm often told or asked, do we have that scene? Because they want to demolish a set. Often on a big film shoot, they'll have two studios going, and they'll build a set in one studio while they're building another one in the other one. We film on that. The other one's finished. They move across, they start filming the other one. They want to strike that set as soon as possible. So they come to me and they say, have we got that scene? And often it's, well, mind a couple of little shots here and there. And you talk with the director and you come up with a list. And often it's the editor that goes along and actually grabs those few little shots that help normally truncate action, because that's one of the fundamental things of editing is making things happen quicker. You don't want to see someone get out of a car, take the key, put it in their pocket, shut the door. Often you see someone jump up and then you cut to them outside slamming the door. And we're all used to seeing that truncated action. It's very good, I think, for you as filmmakers to actually have a go at editing, because it will teach you how you do need different sizes of shots so that you can cut between them. You can be very avant-garde and just jump cut. And it does work sometimes, that method, and depending on the style of film, if you've chosen that style to jump cut, you just buy into it and it's fine. But if it's just out of the blue a jump cut, it's jarring. So I normally say to people that are asking me advice on how to shoot is try and cover a scene with 3 different size lenses, because then you've got the ability to cut away to a detail shot. Often is really useful. I often do a little close-up of a key in a lock, because it allows you to just truncate rather than see someone's body motion having to do all the action. You can make it all run much faster. Now, some of the best editing is invisible. And I think that, often if you go and watch a film and you don't feel any of the editing, any of the cuts, nothing jars, that's great editing. And I love seeing that and actually achieving that myself. But unfortunately, from my background, because I come from commercials and music videos, I first edited about 400 music videos in the late 80s, early 90s. So I got known as the person with a style. And that's what I brought to Lock Stock. And if we can show a clip, actually, I'll just... that's some of the style that I brought to Lock Stock. Luckily, the DP was a friend of mine. We'd actually worked on lots of music videos together. So he gave me some beautiful footage to play with, which was the very graphic shots of people throwing chips and cards towards the camera. At that time, it sounds silly now, but actually very few films had that kind of promo commercial type editing where you actually froze the shot. It was not really done very often. I was a little nervous about doing that, but we tested the film and people loved these scenes. This scene and the drunk scene where it's all kind of sped up and then slowed down were some of the favourite scenes when we tested it. So I decided, well, just put more of it in. So in fact, the film's got an awful lot of this style of editing where we let the music play and it's a montage, and I use freeze frames, sped up action, and it was quite groundbreaking at the time. But nowadays it's seen in films all the time. The rest of the cutting you see is very normal. I mean, there's a very long tracking shot, developing shot, which I just let run. I didn't cut into it at all. But having that long shot allowed me to then go a little crazy for a bit, because one thing about pace in movies is you don't want it to just be one level all the way through. That'd be really boring. So you've got to have peaks and troughs. And often that's developed in the script writing, where you look at where there's a little bit of excitement, and in fact you carefully make sure they're kind of plotted throughout the film. Back when I started, we used to put cards on the wall with a little description of the scene, and we'd have it starting off with the script order, and we'd colour code. So if there was a bit of excitement, we'd put a red dot on it. If it was serious, emotional, we'd put green or something. And you get a picture, a graph of where all the fun action happened. And often we'd end up shifting things around so that you had a little bit of excitement in the third act and it didn't all get too serious or whatever. So we still do that nowadays, but obviously you can print out a little image nowadays. So in a lot of edit suites on film cutting rooms, you'll find they'll have lots of stills, and they'll be in the order of the cut, and the assistant's job is to go and move them around when you've actually done a recut, to actually change the wall so that you can actually see in one image the shape of the movie, because you're concentrating on tiny little areas of the film when you're editing, and it's really hard to have an overall picture. It's a discipline I've learned over years to not make it too fast, because often you can overcut things and make it too tight, and you have to kind of judge a pace so that the whole film runs and keeps people excited enough but doesn't run away. I've seen some movies that cut so fast nowadays. I feel it's ruined the drama, taken the excitement out of it. So yeah, a few techniques used in that, and as I say, I became known as the Doctor for a little while because of everyone in London knew that we pulled out a character and did a pickup shoot to make the film work without that character. Turned into a lad's movie. It had love interest, kind of forced in at script stage, because that's something that film producers and execs always look for. Is normally they need some kind of a love interest, and it often feels kind of forced in. And in this case, it definitely was. It didn't work, so we pulled it out, became a lads movie, and worked. Because Lock Stock was such an instant success, and it was done on really low budget. It was. It sounds like a lot of money, probably to you guys, but £2,000. Sorry, £2 million. £2 million. To make a movie on £2 million is really going at some, it actually, they were going to, they had a proper budget and they were ready to go to camera. They had a lot of the crew in place and they'd decided on the locations, etc. And the money fell through. So they looked again at it and they offered the crew a deferred payment. And they shot it on Super 16, lock stock. It's not 35. They shot it on Super 16 to try and save the money. And luckily the DP had a lot of experience with Super 16 because it's quite critical. You have to get the exposure just right because you're only exposing a tiny bit of negative. If you get it slightly off, it's terribly grainy. So I think he did a brilliant job and most people don't realise it. There's a few soft shots, but we got away with it. I've forgotten where I was going with that. So anyway, yes, I was given every script to read after Gangster #1, Serkis, all these films were London gangster movies. And I thought, I can't do another one straight away. I'm going to end up with being the editor that does London gangster films. I also read them and thought they weren't that good. So I actually did a film with Julian Temple, Pandemonium, which is about Samuel Taylor Coleridge and William Wordsworth, because I felt, right, let me do something serious. I've done something poppy and kind of commercial. Let's do some serious drama, and I was glad I did. A beautiful film, and for me, one of my best pieces of work. Unfortunately, as with a lot of art movies, they have great heart, but people just don't realise how to market them. And I say, well, how can we sell a film about dead poets to young boys that buy cinema tickets? It's true. I mean, it's a difficult one. But a lovely film, and I really enjoyed working on it. And I tend to pick films where I do a lot of commercial films, Resident Evil, where I know I'm not going to dust off my tuxedo. I'm not going to be winning any awards doing Resident Evil. But in between times, I do art movies that are, you know, if they've got really good actors, a great script, I feel it's really worth doing, and I patch them in between the commercial popcorn movies. Anyway, let's show this. This is where editing is everything. And this is Filth and the Fury, which is a documentary about the Sex Pistols. And I did this with Julian. Spent a year editing it. We started off by going to the archive where all the footage shot on the Sex Pistols had been somewhere near Heathrow. Malcolm McLaren had just put it all in a big kind of lock-up. And we dredged through all the footage with me and Julian in one room, and I'd be looking through and I'd say, is this guy important? And he'd go, oh yeah, that's the guy from the London Club. He ran the London Club. Yeah, mark him. So we put a little bit of tape around that bit of film, and a year later we ended up with a documentary which actually was critically really well received, and very, very proud of my work on it, because basically you're given, there's no script. You actually have to write the script in the cutting room. Julian knew John Lydon and the rest of the band really well, and because of that brought an awful lot of extra elements to the project. One of the important things was that John Lydon felt his influences of that era were very important to show within the movie, to give it context, and that's something that I think we achieved really well. Anyway, it's very clear in this.
Total social chaos. There was rioting all over the place. Strikes on every kind of an ear you could think of. The TV channels would go on and off randomly. People were fed up with the old old way. The old way was clearly not working.
Yes, you notice it.
He was told at school, he was told at the job centre.
Obviously quite dramatic, that.
Would you seem to assume that the Sex Pistols coming out is a blessing for those who wanted some sort of rage-filled outlet? Because punk was big back then.
Well, punk was actually disenfranchised youth who felt they had no future at that time, and because of such unrest, civil unrest.
I know this was around the time of like racism protests and fascism.
I mean, guys like that are pretty frightening, aren't they?
I'm racist man, just shouting at the young black woman.
And the thing about punk is it actually, well, not so much punk, but the music movement at that time with ska, two-tone and all that stuff, it brought racial equality because the bands were multiracial. And the Sex Pistols played at a lot of the events that were anti-racist events.
People always give a lot of flack to like punk because, you know, again, it's always about anarchy.
Yeah, people think it was just angry and against all authority.
Behind it, there was, sort of a purpose why it existed.
One thing about editing nowadays, it started off way back, kind of before I got introduced to film editing, where I was called the picture editor, and you'd have sound editors, music editors, people doing visual effects. It's all blurred now that everything's available on your computer. Film editing is cutting music, cutting dialogue, and shaping the sound, putting sound effects in, designing visual effects, and you can do rudimentary stuff. I do often rough in a visual effect. So this doesn't have visual effects, but this is a good example of me basically playing with a song that I was given. I had no sync performance for it, so I've just cheated what I could of John Lydon at the microphone, looking like he might be singing it. And it's interspersed with a lot of the funny kind of characters who John Lydon was influenced by at the time. And it's quite a bizarre scene, but I think you'll probably enjoy it.
I die of nerves before I go on stage because I don't know what I'm going to do. And because of that, I have to just pull things out from deep down inside. 76 trombones to the Look, there's Arthur Askew in there. There's we are the Diddy men, we come from Lottie Yash. There's even, there's nothing wrong with me.
So, the birth of punk in about 4 minutes. Yeah, I was really pleased with that. I stumbled upon that the other day when I was looking through my films, and it brings back a lot of real memories of making that piece. If you just had the music, it wouldn't be exciting. If you just had the narration as well, it would be good. But we interplaced little bits of Arthur Askew and characters, and made more of a track of it. And the soundtrack, you'd almost listen to that and enjoy it without seeing the images as well. So
essentially, what people call these days VJing.
Yes, yes, it does cross over.
DJing.
It's like a live projected visual and music experience.
Do you mean holographic music sticks? No, it just sounded like I thought it was explaining that. No, there is physically a thing like that.
Anyway, then just to show you something that's got a whole completely different feel, can you go to LK opening for me? This is a Lenny Kravitz concert film I did back in '92 or '93, and the director used to be a cinematographer. So in fact, what I did have, which was really his strength, was beautiful cinematography. He's got a really good eye, and he gave me all these very lovely, long tracking shots to play with. So this is completely different style. This is with dissolves and long shots, just to show you something different.
Mostly sunny in New York City. Temperatures around the country.
Looks like we're going to be in pretty good shape for the balance of the 4th of July. We have plenty of sunshine.
Erie River crossings all looking good. Staten Island down Outer Bridge crossing at the 25 meters way, so use the goggles instead. The Holland and the George Washington Bridge are looking good as well.
Experience what life was like.
Some more the hardships, and I was really heavy in the darkness.
Daily news reports hundreds of New York City
Now you know you're in a recording studio somewhere in New York with Lenny Kravitz, and we haven't said anything. Just by using beautiful images and graphically matching them up to do some interesting transitions. And it's a nice slow way into a concert film, because once we get to him on stage, it goes crazy and it's fast cut. I also particularly like that long tracking shot in the studio, because you know it's real, you feel they're live, you know he's really playing those drums, there's nothing faked. And a lot of concert films I've had to do, I did Take That's first concert film, and Gary Barlow can't dance. He's terrible. So one of my jobs was to make him look like he could dance. So again, that's cutting things out. So whenever he hesitated or he looked like he wasn't really in control, I cut those out, and it was what I revealed of him that made you convinced he was just as good as Jason Orange, where in fact Jason Orange was actually brilliant. So that's some of the tricks of editing, where you can make people that can't dance look, well, not completely can't dance, but you can make them look like they're much better than they really are. And that's all about choosing the angles. I do a lot of cosmetic editing. I often you'll see a film and I try not to be rude about people. There might be an actress that's got a big butt, you won't find shots of her butt in the movie, because the editor will choose to cut before it's revealed and cut to a close-up. Or we used to do it back in the music video days, where you wouldn't shoot. There's a classic one which was one of those big American bands, I'm trying to remember their name, and there were 3 very normal shaped beings and one very large girl, and she was always just close up, and they stretched it to make it look tall and thin, which is terrible, but that's, you're selling and it's bad, but that's the way it is. It's what people want to see.
Did you know that was happening?
Oh, of course.
No, but she might not see
The Mamas and Papas. That's the band. Yeah. And if you look at their videos, you'll find just close-ups of her, and everyone else is this big.
She didn't. I always wondered why she had such a long head.
And we stretched the image. Terrible, but those are some of the secrets. Coming from that background, I've had to force myself to learn to give up that discipline a little bit, because what's so important in drama is the performance of the actor. And you know, they might have a hair slightly out. If the performance is much better than the other takes, it's down to the performance. You can't, unless you're cheating what they said into their mouth, which we do sometimes. You go with what's best performance-wise. If the camera has got a little jolt in the move, you go, well, so be it. It's the best for the actor. One of the advantages nowadays with visual effects, and some of the visual effects being relatively cheap to do, a lot of modern day editing on features is taking a split screen. So if you've got a locked off shot with two actors, which is often in a movie, two actors talking to one another, you might find that one actor's firing on take 1 and the other one's firing on take 3. Cut it down the middle, put the two together. Do it all the time nowadays. Simple split screens, and often they can be done. My assistant might actually achieve that in After Effects. Just take the original files and create the split screen and it's done. So we do a lot of that. In crowd shots, there's always some member of the extras who looks straight down the barrel of the... and you know, you can fix that. In visual effects, you take a bit of the action where they happen to be looking away from the camera, and you can cheat them in. They'll just drop their face in with their eyes not on the lens. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to ask, what sort of responsibilities do you have with sound, or is that a completely separate department?
It varies film to film, and project to project, because obviously the Filth and the Fury was a lot of me actually creating the sound bed, and when it came to sound editing, they just had to try and make what I did cleaner.
Oh, fair enough.
On some big pictures, you still do have music editors. It's less and less now, but if I'm really, sometimes the production schedule's really fast. On the last Resident Evil I did, we had very little time between going to camera and actually releasing the movie. Yeah. So we did have a music editor come on because I just didn't feel I had the time to play with the music. Because the great thing about having a music editor is, okay, I might put in some music beds to give a mood. Yeah. But then as you're fine cutting all the time, to actually cut the music again to fit what you've done with the picture is a whole nother layer. To give someone else that responsibility is rather nice. Yeah, so, and then also, you know, they come up with other tracks that they feel might fit better. Often it's all temp, and you just steal from other movies to give the right feel and mood, and give it. Then you've got kind of a map for the composer to work to. Yeah. And quite often the composer's quite challenged because you've stolen from Gladiator and Inception, and then they go, oh my God, I can't have a big orchestra. But yeah, sound is so important. I definitely have got a clip where now this was Nick the Greek, and it was just simply his character name that triggered in my mind, and I remembered my parents really loved Zorba the Greek piece of music. So I brought in the LP and put it in, and it worked so well. I think it's been used since in a similar fashion. This is actually a reimagining of the original recording. The composer completely plagiarized it, but this is where music was really, it helps build tension and draws you into what's going to be something really exciting.
Did you, sorry to interrupt, but like, did you choose all the music, or did the director sort of come to you and say?
Well, Matthew Vaughan's tried to lay claim to it, sorry. Guy has probably laid claim to some of it, but actually it was stuff I was listening to.
Oh, brilliant.
There were a few tracks that I didn't. James Brown was brought in by the record company.
Soundtracks.
But yeah, Mile High Club,
Yeah.
loved that band. I put it on,
Yeah.
it stayed. It was frightening actually, because when we were making the movie, it was going to be distributed by, we were basically delivering it to Handmade Films. And there wasn't much money. There was very little money for music. And it was a frightening concept that I'd have to just let all that music go, and we'd have to put library on there, cheap library.
Yeah.
But Handmade had a real financial problem. Their parent company went under, and we were able to, just as we were finishing the movie, to take it to a new distributor, which was Hologram, which is now Universal. And they loved what we did with the music so much, they put up the money for it. So it saved our life, basically.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a good example of how the music can have an impact on something that's not shot in any special way particularly, but it just sets up a brilliant mood.
We've got to find them. Now, no fucking about now, Nick. Where can I find those guns?
So lull before the storm, which is very important as well, you know, let everything drop out, because you just know something is all going to kick off, and that you really enjoy that moment. Yeah, music's vital. And I get very close with composers, and I try and work with them very early on in the production, and often get them to send me all their kind of catalogue, their library, to try and use their material to build a kind of map of music, a music bed for it. And it, you know, that way at least it's got it's got their style on it. Inevitably you have to cheat and steal something from Hans Zimmer, the god of music for film.
We were looking on your Wikipedia, not Wikipedia, IMDb page earlier, and we saw that you did the, it said second unit directing, I think it was. What was that like, doing that?
Great, and I've felt for about the last 5 years that I'd like to make the leap to directing.
Yeah, because isn't second unit when you do the sort of like the other stuff that the director can't shoot or something like? I heard like nowadays it's like used for like action shots and stuff like that, where you shoot the action sequences, and usually stuntmen go on to be second directors a lot of the time because they know how to shoot action sequences, and then you sweep it down, which I always think gets passed over so easily, but usually it's like one of the most...
It can be the making of a movie.
Yeah.
In the Bond films, it's the action you remember.
Yeah.
Now, some of the directors that have directed the Bond films have been brilliant, but I'm sure in private, if you ask them, you know, how important was their second unit director, it's vital.
Yeah.
Because the whole opening of Casino Royale wasn't shot by that director, it was shot by a second unit director.
Yeah,
okay, there's a little bit of him saying, oh, I want it like this, but...
I think the first time I heard about second unit directing was with Andy Serkis.
Oh yeah.
He's the second unit director, I think, for the last Lord.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Hobbit,
yeah.
And he's doing all of that, and those are some of the best bits in that film, and I thought that was great. He also directed a video game, which is good, but
yeah,
most interesting.
Yeah, he's a lovely guy actually. Yeah, he was in Pandemonium. I got to know him quite well on that, and he's done some interesting little short films as well. He's definitely keen to get in director's chair, and I imagine he'll transition. Yeah, no, he's excellent. I was pleased to see that he was doing that.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
How long do you? What's the least amount of time that you could shoot, that you could edit a feature in? What's the tightest schedule you've ever done?
I don't know if we've ever actually achieved what was considered the normal kind of budgeted, low budget feature schedule is kind of 6-6-6. 6 weeks shoot, 6 weeks cut, 6 weeks finish, which means mixing and picture finishing. That's often the way they budget a low budget movie. And you start off like that, and sure enough, when you're 4 weeks into the edit, you can decide and show the execs and say, well, actually this is really good. You need more time on this. And that's when the purse strings open up a bit. If it's good, if it's bad, then you still have to finish it in 6 weeks. And luckily I haven't had one of those. But I know they happen, where it's just like, this hasn't worked. You've got to scramble and try and get it done in that schedule. So that's kind of, I think I've probably done it in about 10 weeks. That's probably about the quickest. But some, you know, the last couple of Resident Evil films were both 3D. So suddenly you're not just cutting a 2D picture, you're cutting a 3D picture. There's a lot more to it.
How can you make a film 3D?
Well, they were both originated in 3D, so we actually filmed them in 3D, which Avatar did. A lot of films that have come out since have been dimensionalized, it's called, where you take the 2D original image and use computers to offset, and you remove foreground people and you put the background slightly offset to add depth.
And that's what gives sort of the 3D effect. Like.
Gives you a very basic 3D effect. It gives you layers. Whereas when you're filming with two cameras, they're slightly offset. Normally it's one on top of another with a what's called a half mirror. So one camera lens is looking through a half mirror and the other is reflecting off it. And that way you can have them actually looking at in exactly the same angle on something, but then you pull them slightly apart to emulate someone's eyes. So the top camera goes slightly offset, and that's called your interocular, which is the distance between the eyes, as it were. And that, depending on how wide or close the shot is, a close shot you wouldn't have it too wide apart, but a wide shot you can go quite wide. And that gives you depth because you're seeing round. It's difficult with action actually because you start to see punches missing. We found on Resident Evil that the stunt people have had to be hit rather than just faking it and going past. Now you've got a camera slightly looking round and it gives it away. So often they have to get closer and closer and sometimes hit. So in that respect, shooting action in 3D is a little more demanding.
When you do like edit 3D, do you ever actually like watch it in 3D?
Well, I can lay claim to being the first person on the planet to cut in 3D. Because I was very involved with Avid developing the Media Composer, and I became one of their beta testers. And Avatar, they used an earlier version of Avid which couldn't run 3D. So what they did is they cut in 2D and then they conformed it into 3D and projected it to watch it, and then took notes, went back to S3, tweaked it, went back. So I knew they were developing a 3D software, which was version 4. And it was the first time you could actually take side by side both images and see them in 3D on your edit screen. And I decided to ditch the whole concept of carrying 2D and 3D because it was just going to be time consuming. And I took a gamble and I just went for 3D. We tested it and it worked. We decided on a workflow of how to get the dailies to me, and the camera company actually created an on-set lab for me because no, Deluxe didn't know how to do it. Technicolor didn't know how to do it. It was all new, and they set up a lab in a U-Haul trailer which basically took all the camera dailies and put them together for me, made them stereo. And we cut in stereo. So I had a 3D screen and I had the glasses. Which I think is important when you're making a 3D picture. If you're shooting 3D, I think it's vital to actually see it in 3D, because images that might look quite ordinary in 2D can have enormous depth to them. There was one particular shot in one of the Resident Evils where we had a really low camera on a beach, tracking slowly, and it was Alice was far in the distance, walking to the surf with a helicopter near her. And in 2D, it was just a long shot, it was a wide shot, but in 3D, the depth was just fabulous. And I had to tell them to use it in the trailer because they wouldn't have used it, they wouldn't have picked it. The trailer company were cutting in 2D and they picked what they thought were the best images out of the movie. I said, well, put this in for the 3D version. Sure enough, it ended up in the trailer. And it's one of the most memorable shots of the 3D trailer.
I was going to ask them, how do you actually feel about cinema turning 3D? Like, are you pro 3D or not? Because I know a lot of people who actually film it in 3D, quite a few aren't actually that bothered about it. Like, and pass over it.
I keep wavering on it.
What, depending on how good it is per film, or whether it's used for the benefit of the film or just because...
I'm not positive that it's in every type of movie adds something.
Yeah.
I know that some of the directors like Spielberg, you know, I don't think he's desperate to do everything in 3D. But Scorsese apparently wants to do everything in 3D now. He's done 3D and loves it. So I don't know what will happen with 3D. I think that it has its place, and it hasn't really taken on as much as everyone was hoping. Certainly in Hollyweird, as I like to call it. We were all hoping that sports would drive everyone to get a 3D TV.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's very kind. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. It's fantastic.